Dean Martin refused to save Sammy Davis Jr.'s life. His reason will shock you. The phone rang at Dean Martin's Beverly Hills home at 2 in the morning on March 15, 1972. It wasn't unusual for Dean to receive late-night calls from his Rat Pack brothers, but this one was different. Frank Sinatra's voice was shaking with panic, something Dean had never heard in 40 years of friendship. "Dino, we got a problem. A big one. Sammy's in trouble. Real trouble." What happened next would expose the darkest secret of the Rat Pack and reveal a side of Dean Martin that would shock the world. When his brother needed him most, the King of Cool became the coldest man in Hollywood. Sammy Davis Jr. was drowning. Not in water, but in debt. Gambling debt. The kind of debt that doesn't come with payment plans or second chances. The kind of debt that comes with broken legs, concrete shoes, and shallow graves in the Nevada desert. Sammy owed the Chicago outfit nearly $2 million, money he had lost in backroom poker games and high-stakes craps tables that he couldn't stay away from. For months he had been getting warnings. Friendly visits from well-dressed men who spoke in soft voices about honor and responsibility. But Sammy kept gambling, kept losing, kept digging himself deeper into a hole that was starting to look like a grave. The addiction had consumed him completely, turning the entertainer who could charm any audience into a desperate man who would bet on anything, anytime, anywhere. The breaking point came on a cold Tuesday night in March when two men cornered Sammy outside the Copa room at the Sands Hotel. They didn't threaten him with words. They didn't need to. They simply showed him a photograph of his wife, May, walking their daughter to school. The message was clear: pay up or lose everything that matters. Sammy had 72 hours to come up with $2 million, or his family would pay the price. That's when Frank made the call. Frank Sinatra had always been the leader of the Rat Pack, the one who made the decisions and cleaned up the messes. He had connections with the same people who were threatening Sammy, and he knew how these things worked. You paid what you owed, or you disappeared. There was no third option. But $2 million was serious money, even for Frank. He needed help, and there was only one person he could turn to: Dean Martin. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was calling the one man in their group who had always maintained the most distance, who had always seemed slightly apart from their brotherhood, even when he was standing right next to them. "Dino, you there?" Frank's voice cut through the static of the long-distance call. "I'm here, Frank. What's going on?" "Sammy's got himself into some trouble with the boys from Chicago. Big trouble. He owes them $2 million, and they want it by Friday or they're going to hurt his family." Dean lit a cigarette and walked to his window, looking out at the lights of Los Angeles. He had been expecting this call for years. Sammy's gambling problem was an open secret in their circle, and Dean had watched his friend spiral deeper and deeper into addiction, with a mixture of pity and disgust. Sammy was weak, and Dean despised weakness above all things. "How much does he need?" Dean asked, though he already knew the answer. $2 million. I can cover half, but I need you to come up with the rest. We're brothers, Dino. We take care of our own." Dean took a long drag of his cigarette and considered Frank's words. Brothers. They had been calling themselves brothers for 20 years, performing together, drinking together, living the high life as the kings of Las Vegas. But blood was thicker than stage chemistry, and Dean had always known the difference between real family and show business family. No. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Frank couldn't believe what he was hearing. In 20 years of friendship, Dean had never said no to anything important. He had always been there, always been dependable, always been part of the team. "What did you say?" "I said no, Frank. I'm not bailing Sammy out of this mess." Frank's voice rose with desperation. "Dino, They're going to kill him. These aren't businessmen we're talking about. These are killers. If Sammy doesn't pay, they'll torture him first, then they'll go after May and the kid." Dean's response was cold as winter rain. Then maybe Sammy should have thought about that before he pissed away $2 million at the craps table. Frank couldn't process what he was hearing. This wasn't the Dean Martin he knew. This wasn't the man who had stood by him through scandals and setbacks, who had been his most loyal friend for 2 decades. This was a stranger. "Dean, what the hell is wrong with you? This is Sammy we're talking about." "Our Sammy? Our Sammy?" Dean's voice took on an edge that Frank had never heard before. "Frank, let me ask you something. In all the years we've known Sammy, has he ever once put himself on the line for us? Has he ever once sacrificed anything for this so-called brotherhood?" "That's not fair, Dean. Sammy's been loyal." "Loyal to what? To the money? To the fame? To the reflected glory of being associated with us?" "Sammy's never been loyal to anything but Sammy. And now that his selfishness has caught up with him, you want me to pay for it?" Frank was stunned by the venom in Dean's voice. "I can't believe you're talking about him like this. We've been through everything together." "Have we? Really?" "Because I remember it differently. I remember Sammy missing shows when it was convenient for him. I remember him negotiating separate deals behind our backs. I remember him throwing us under the bus whenever it served his interests. And now you want me to give him $1 million to save him from his own stupidity?" The truth was that Dean Martin had never really liked Sammy Davis Jr., and Frank was finally hearing why. For 20 years, Dean had smiled and played along, had gone through the motions of friendship and brotherhood. But beneath the surface, there had always been resentment, always been judgment, always been the quiet conviction that Sammy was different from them in ways that went beyond talent or personality. "Dean, please," Frank begged, "don't do this. Don't let our brother die over money." "He's not my brother, Frank. He never was." The line went quiet for a long moment. Frank felt like he was talking to a stranger, like the man he had considered his closest friend had suddenly revealed himself to be someone else entirely. "What does that mean?" Dean walked back to his desk and stubbed out his cigarette. "It means that I've been playing a role for 20 years, Frank. The role of the loyal friend, the dependable partner, the guy who goes along to get along. But I'm done playing that role. Sammy made his choices. Let him live with the consequences. The consequences could be death, Dean. Then maybe he should have made better choices." Frank tried one more time. "Dean, I'm begging you. If you won't do it for Sammy, do it for me. Do it for our friendship." "Our friendship?" Dean laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Frank, our friendship ended years ago. I just never told you. We're business partners. We're colleagues. But we're not friends. Friends don't use each other the way you've used me." "How have I used you?" "Every time you needed muscle for your mob connections, you called me. Every time you needed someone to make you look good on stage, you called me. Every time you needed someone to clean up your messes with women or gambling or politics, you called me. But when have you ever just called to talk? When have you ever asked about my problems, my worries, my life outside of this circus we've created?" Frank had no answer because they both knew Dean was right. Their relationship had always been transactional, based on mutual benefit rather than genuine affection. "So you're just going to let Sammy die?" "I'm going to let Sammy face the consequences of his actions. Like a man. Something he's never done before." Frank hung up the phone without saying goodbye. He sat in his study for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. The Rat Pack, the brotherhood that had defined their lives and careers for 20 years, had just died with a single phone call. The next morning, Frank called every wealthy person he knew, begging for loans, calling in favors, mortgaging his future to save Sammy's life. He managed to raise the $2 million, but it cost him nearly everything. His marriage to Mia Farrow, already on shaky ground, collapsed under the strain of his desperation and the revelation of how deep his connections to dangerous people really went. His finances were devastated, forcing him to take on projects he didn't want and performances that felt like penance. His health suffered from the stress, and friends noticed how the weight of carrying his brotherhood alone was aging him rapidly. But he saved Sammy's life, proving that at least one member of the Rat Pack understood what loyalty really meant. When Sammy found out that Dean had refused to help, he was devastated. Not because of the money, but because of what the refusal revealed about their relationship. For 20 years, Sammy had believed that he was part of something special, part of a brotherhood that transcended business. Finding out that Dean had never considered him a real friend was more painful than any physical beating the mob could have given him. "Why?" Sammy asked Frank. "Why wouldn't he help?" Frank didn't know how to explain it. How do you tell someone that they were never really accepted, never really part of the family? That they were tolerated rather than loved? "Dean's going through some things," Frank said weakly. "No," Sammy said, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding. "Dean's always gone through the same thing, he just never let us see it before." The Rat Pack continued to perform together for several more years, but the magic was gone. Dean was still professional, still talented, still the same smooth performer he had always been. But there was a coldness now, a distance that everyone could feel, but nobody talked about. He showed up, did his job, and left. There were no more late-night drinking sessions, no more practical jokes, no more brotherhood. Sammy never got over the betrayal. He spent the rest of his life wondering what he had done wrong, how he had failed to earn the acceptance he thought he had. He never gambled again. But the damage was done. The knowledge that Dean Martin had been willing to let him die rather than part with money had broken something inside him that never healed. In 1990, when Sammy Davis Jr. died of throat cancer, Dean Martin didn't attend the funeral. Frank begged him to come, told him it would mean everything to Sammy's family. But Dean refused. When asked why, Dean's response was simple and brutal. "I don't go to funerals for people I never really knew." Frank Sinatra realized that night that Dean Martin had been telling the truth all along. They had never been brothers. They had been colleagues playing roles, entertainers pretending to be friends for the sake of their audience. The Rat Pack had been the greatest act in show business history, but it had always been just that, an act. Dean Martin had revealed himself that night in 1972. And what he revealed was a man who could watch a friend die, rather than admit weakness, rather than show vulnerability, rather than acknowledge that some things were more important than money or pride. The King of Cool had always been exactly that, cool. So cool that his heart had frozen solid years ago, so cold that he could calculate the value of a human life in dollars and cents and find it wanting. The most shocking thing about Dean Martin's refusal to save Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't the money. It was the revelation that beneath the charming smile and easy laugh was a man who had never really cared about anyone but himself. The brotherhood that millions of fans believed in, the loyalty that seemed to define the Rat Pack, had all been an illusion. The greatest act in show business history had fooled everyone, including the performers themselves. The Rat Pack died that night, killed by the coldest man in Hollywood who had been hiding in plain sight for 20 years.